philosophy. Philosophy and children. Philosophy with children. Philosophy for children. Yeah. Philosophy for children. Philosophy for children Hawaii. I like that. I'd like to share with you a defining moment that brought together these ideas of philosophy and children and led to this. The Uehiro Academy for Philosophy and Ethics in Education. Philosophy for children. That idea came from a man by the name of Matthew Lipman. And I heard about Matt Lipman in 1984, and it sounded like such a good idea that I wanted to find out more about it. So I went to Montclair to study with Matt Lipman, met people from all around the world who practiced together, doing this together. They brought in a group of real kids, 6th graders, off of a playground in the midst of summer, put them up on a stage, and they began an inquiry together using Lipman's approach. They did philosophy together, and it was mind-blowing. It changed my life. The closest I've ever been to an epiphany. Here were young people in a circle, picking a topic that they wanted to talk about, talking about it together. And at the end of that session, I figured, I want to bring this back to Hawaii. I want to make this available to every kid. Some of the things that I've come to see over the years are really transformative about what we do. Transformative is a word that's out there a lot. People use it a lot. I think maybe overuse it. But I think that p4c is really transformative. It gives traction to the idea that students ought to be at the center of things. It's more than what's traditionally thought of as student-centered. This is deeply, profoundly student-centered. They're in a circle, which put the teacher in this very new and different relationship with their students, who in effect becomes one of them in the circle, not in advance knowing what the lesson's about, where it's going to go, but able to let go of that role and ease into a whole different way of being with students and appreciating them for their ideas and what they think. And it works in both directions. The students come to appreciate their teacher in a whole new way, that their teacher has questions.
I'm Dr. Amber Strong Makayao. I am the Director of Curriculum and Research here at the Uehiro Academy. My job is multifaceted. The first part of it relates to conducting research related to philosophy for children. We look at the impact of p4c in the K-12 setting at the university and also in the community with our partners. And then I also work in the College of Education with pre-service teachers that are learning to become social studies, high school social studies teachers. And I use philosophy for children as the main focus of my teaching with them and the pedagogy that I teach them for becoming successful teachers in the future.
And I'm Dr. Chad Miller. I'm the Director of Teacher Development here at the Uehiro Academy. And part of my job is being a philosopher in residence, which is essentially I'm going into the field and supporting teachers who are currently doing p4c in their classrooms. So on a daily basis, I'm in classrooms from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, supporting those teachers in their efforts to make philosophy a living and reliable educational option. I work in the College of Education with pre-service teacher candidates who are becoming English teachers. So I teach those classes, and basically use philosophy for children to teach those courses. And those teachers are expected to develop their own pedagogy, the philosopher's pedagogy, in their practice.
I had these big beliefs about what I wanted to do in the classroom, but I hadn't really come across actual classroom strategies for making that happen. And I ended up taking Philosophy for Children from Dr. Tom Jackson. And in that class was the first time that I felt like I was given tools for bringing about this type of Deweyan education that I wanted to use to teach high school social studies. And up until that point, a lot of Philosophy for Children was done in the elementary setting, and what teachers and students would do is they would have p4c time where they would stop all other instruction, they'd change the chairs in the classroom, sit around and talk about things that they wondered about, and they would do p4c, and it was wonderful and awesome. And I wanted to think about, well, in the high school setting or the secondary setting, when I couldn't always just have p4c time, when I was responsible for teaching particular content like US history or psychology and there were state standards, how could I use this same pedagogical approach in the high school setting to teach that specific content? And that's really where the philosopher's pedagogy evolved from, was trying to find a way to do p4c within the context of teaching high school social studies.
One of the things that really drew me to p4c Hawaiʻi was that it's really reconceptualized what philosophy means. Coming from a background in philosophy, when I think of philosophy, as do most Americans, we think of academic philosophy. We think of Kant and Descartes and Plato. And what Dr. Tom Jackson refers to that type of philosophy is big P philosophy. It is the philosophers and the philosophies that we read about in our Philosophy 100 classes. But in order to bring p4c, or the philosopher's pedagogy or philosophy, into our classrooms in terms of instructing specific content areas, we have to reconceptualize philosophy in a different way. And that's what Dr. J calls little p philosophy. It's this notion of wonderment, and it's an activity that we can all do, and we're all born with that ability of being able to think and to philosophize. So we're not saying that the philosopher's pedagogy doesn't necessarily discount or disregard big P philosophy. That's very, very important. But what we're primarily concerned with is utilizing little p philosophy, reactivating that wonderment that we're all born with.
So when Chad and I were doing some thinking about how do we communicate to teachers what it means to practice little p philosophy in the classroom, we were thinking that in addition to there being the conceptual pillars of Philosophy for Children, community, inquiry, philosophy, and reflection, there were really a set of commitments or dispositions that teachers must have if they're going to practice little p philosophy in the classroom. And what we're calling these are the 6 commitments of the philosopher's pedagogy. And the first commitment is that teachers must be open to living the examined life themselves, both in the classroom and outside the classroom.
This really comes out of the Apology, when Socrates famously remarked that the unexamined life is not worth living. And why that is so important is because if the teacher is unwilling to think about and question things that are happening in their own life outside of school, then it's nearly impossible for them to have their students do that within the classroom.
The second is that they need to see teaching and learning as a shared activity between students and teachers. No longer is the teacher the sage on the stage that has all the information that's dumping it into the minds of their students, but it's really the idea of co-inquiry, and that the students and teachers are thinking about and wrestling with complex ideas together and creating products together, and really seeing the classroom space as a place where there is an expert that might have more information, but that expert is also willing to learn from the student and facilitate the student's learning, and in a lot of cases learn things from their students. And a lot of this is built on the idea of social constructivism, the work of Paulo Freire of looking at power relationships in the classroom, but it's really changing that dynamic so that students and teachers are learning together.
Right. The third commitment is the teacher really must see content in a very different way. It's really the content is no longer just the textbook or the canon. It is really the interaction between the canon and all the participants, including the teacher and the students, their beliefs, their experiences, their wondering.
And then the fourth commitment of the philosopher's pedagogy is that teachers must see philosophy as the general theory of education. All teachers should have a philosophy about what they believe they should be doing in the classroom, or the type of teacher that they want to be. And we believe that education is more of an experience where we're nurturing the whole child. We're working on their intellectual development, social and emotional development, and the entire aspect of what it means to be a human being.
The fifth commitment is that teachers and students must make philosophy a living classroom practice. In order to do that, there's several tools and structures that we've utilized and grown and are evolving in Philosophy for Children Hawaii. But one of the main ones that you'll see in our p4c classroom is the use of a community ball. And from an outsider's perspective, it just looks like we're throwing around a fuzzy yarn ball. But there's some rituals that go along with it, with some several rights that come with the community ball. So for example, the student who has the community ball has the right to speak, and they can expect everybody else to actually be listening to them.
One of the other main strategies is something called plain vanilla, and it's a structure for setting up deliberative inquiry inside of the classroom. And in some cases, in the elementary setting, students just think about things that they wonder off the top of their head or that were inspired by interactions in their life. In the high school setting, we've really experimented with how can they be generating inquiry questions from texts that they're reading, maybe from a lab experiment or a piece of artwork that they saw in a gallery, a sports game, so that they have some sort of stimulus that they're generating their questions from. They use the Good Thinkers Toolkit to generate their questions, and then all of the students write their questions up on the board, and the students then get to vote on the question that they want to talk about. And they place their votes, they elect the question that they're interested in inquiring about with their peers, and the person whose question got chosen is the student that begins the inquiry. They explain why they were wondering about that question, why they want to think about it with other people, where did it come from. And from there, the teacher facilitates an inquiry with the rest of the classroom. So plain vanilla is a big crux of Philosophy for Children of Hawaii because it gives us structure for having philosophical inquiry and dialogue in the classroom.
In the summer of 2015, I traveled with some p4c Hawaiʻi teachers to Japan, where we worked with Japanese teachers in an exchange to share ideas about p4c. And I really learned a lot from that trip. And one of the points that I took away from it is a lot of people, both in Japan and here in Hawaii, are looking for the formula for how to do p4c. They see it as a bag of tricks or a set of strategies that can easily be taught in a one-day workshop. At a deeper level, p4c is about more than a bag of tricks or a set of strategies. It's a set of internal commitment, an ethical commitment to aloha. It's to a deep and genuine caring for the people in the community. A key part of understanding p4c Hawaii is understanding the community of inquiry approach that it uses. Two parts. Community is about the heart, the relationships, and inquiry is about the mind and the rigor. So to understand p4c Hawaii, you need to understand what is community, what is inquiry, and how do the two relate. And when I first started p4c Hawaii, I really focused on this part, as most people do. So we can go back to Vygotsky, who said thinking is internalized speech. It's about creating a place where excellent thinking is practiced, modeled, and learned. As I did p4c Hawaii for more years, and especially as I got into counseling and worked with kids who aren't heard enough, I came to appreciate more of the community side of p4c Hawaii. We want to create a place that's intellectually safe, where people don't put each other down or say mean things or do unkind things that interfere with inquiry. But to me it goes a little bit deeper. It's not just the absence of bad things, it's the present of a caring, of a word we use in Hawaii, a deep aloha. And this community really precedes the inquiry, and in itself is extremely important. It's not about only mind, it's not about only heart, but it's about the relationship between the two. Really, community and inquiry are mutually reinforcing, and you see the potential when they're united together.
From the very beginning, Tom Jackson, Dr. J, realized that we needed to really support teachers in this practice. We had at the high school a group of teachers who were interested and willing to kind of learn a bit more about this approach to integrating p4c into their content areas, into their curriculum. Thanks to the Uehiro Foundation, the philosophy department received a small pledge to help grow the initiative. What we realized is that if we wanted this kind of movement to spread across the state, it wasn't going to be a subject-centered movement. It wasn't going to be about the subject of philosophy. It was going to be about the activity of incorporating philosophical inquiry into whatever subject area teachers were teaching. A philosopher in residence isn't a subject expert, just kind of learning to be a participant, figuring out what the classroom is like, how the different teachers create their classroom environments, the relationships that they create with students, the way that they organize their units, their curriculum, just the whole flow of the class. Another thing that emerged interestingly as we branched out at Kailua High School and I started working with more and more teachers, so by the time I kind of moved on to a different school and kind of handed the reins at Kailua High School to a different person, I was working with something like 20 to 25 teachers from a variety of disciplines. And one of the things that I realized is that I could really serve a function in helping be a bridge builder between these different disciplines. So for example, if something interesting, a teacher was doing something interesting and innovative in English class, that might translate really well to the freshman science class that I was also working with, or to the junior social studies class that I was working with. And kind of letting those teachers know what was happening in other subject areas, things that teachers were doing that they could then kind of cross over and reinforce what was happening among classrooms, because often teachers kind of stay in their subject area silo. So helping them break free of that and really kind of build a more kind of cohesive student experience across the different subject areas. If I had to boil it down to maybe three main roles, I think the first would be to help keep the focus on philosophical inquiry, on that idea of we're here to do something bigger, more meaningful, and more interesting, right? I think the second role is to help create these communities of inquiry, to really participate in the communities and be a full-fledged member rather than just somebody who kind of passes by, gives recommendations, and passes on. And then finally, as a collaborator, somebody with whom teachers could talk about curriculum, student behavior, bigger pictures in terms of school vision, all the things that teachers want to talk and think about, being there for them in that capacity. One of the things I realized early on is that when we say P4C, we really don't mean philosophy for children, meaning people under 18 years of age, right? A child is anybody who's full of wonder. And that then includes all these teachers that I worked with at Kailua High School. So when we sat together, when we had department meetings after school, or even like stipend days, and we would get together and meet, those were P4C sessions. We would have a question that would come out. It would emerge based upon what we were thinking about together, and then we would discuss and have an inquiry about that question. So we were doing P4C among ourselves as a faculty, and a lot of the teachers realized that, and realized that was really what was allowing them to be more successful in integrating it into their classroom. They had kind of an abstract understanding of it, but it wasn't until we started really doing it among ourselves as a faculty, as professionals, that a lot of them really kind of internalized it and realized, oh, this is what we're after in terms of a learning experience. This is what we're after in terms of an intellectually safe community. So a lot of those concepts that they are introduced to became much more kind of actual lived concepts because we were doing it